What is up there, guys? This is Cobb, and I get asked quite a bit, especially from players who've quit World of Warcraft, will Legion save WoW? Should they come back for Legion? So I just want to talk about that a little bit, share my thoughts and opinions, as well as hear what you guys have to say down below in the comments. This is a very, very point of view based topic, so don't be surprised if we disagree on a few things. So will Legion save the World of Warcraft? Now, what do we mean by save World of Warcraft? If by save we mean return it to its former glory in TBC and Wrath, when the game was actively gaining, you know, tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of new players every single month, then no, Legion will not be doing any of that. So in the context of the WoW of today, by saving the game, what we actually mean, I think, is stopping the bleed, stitching shut the wound inflicted by the Warlords of Draenor expansion. Because that was the expansion that really split the game from the bollock up, and the guts were all rolling out like spaghetti, and then Blizzard tried to, you know, come along with some emergency patch 6.1, then they fucked that up with the selfie cameras and tried to call it a content patch, and oh man, now they do have a very, very steep hill to climb when it comes to Legion, because let's rein it back in here. Warlords of Draenor was actually a hyped expansion. I was invited to the alpha testing of Warlords, so I got a bit of an early taste of the disappointment that was rolling in like a shitstorm, but most people were actually very, very excited for WoD. Ability pruning was hyped, returning to Outland was hyped, garrisons were essentially sold as player housing, and 3 million players who were not playing during Mr. Pandaria returned to WoW for this new expansion. And then all 3 million of them left in the first few months, followed by a couple more million over the months that followed. To my memory, WoD has been the biggest letdown to WoW players in the game's history, and for that reason all of us, you, me, current and potential players alike, have to be naturally skeptical of Legion. If Sylvanas is War Chief, Varien is dead, and Illidan is back, you have to know that the WoW team at Blizzard know that they have a lot to bounce back from. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Are they just getting desperate, or do we give them the kick up the asses that they needed to make a solid expansion this time? Time will tell. But for all the uncertainty and general lack of faith from players who have left the game, I can't help but feel like the launch of Legion could fall a little bit flat. As mentioned, nearly 3 million players resubscribed for Warlords. I would personally be shocked if half of that number returned for Legion. Not that 1.5 or maybe even 2 million players coming back to the game, you know, isn't an awesome number, of course it is, but would be a dizzying achievement if Blizzard were able to match the launch of WoD in terms of returning players. Most people I speak to who quit during Warlords or even Pandaria come across as very, very cautious, very, very jaded, and most of them have already moved on to other games at this time. So that's the launch about covered. Could be a bit hit and miss. Quickly going to remind everyone that every point I make from here on out, you know, is going to be my own opinion and from a PvP's perspective. So don't take it as me, you know, writing a Bible or whatever based on what I'm saying here. It ain't that serious, man. So anyways, after the launch, I think Legion will do really, really well during the first few months of the expansion, unlike WoD, which started to suck literally after a couple of weeks. In Legion, the leveling should be, you know, at least as engaging as it was in WoD. I know leveling is, you know, a face roll, grinding time sink these days, but at least we have, you know, cool cinematics every now and again. At endgame as a PvP, a few things will probably happen. People are going to realize that honor talents basically do nothing to help balance competitive PvP. Just like every other talent system, there will be cookie cutter builds and certain talents that you must switch into when facing certain arena comps if you want to perform optimally, and at that point, these talents might as well be leveling perks, baseline spells, and passive buffs. So calling it right here, PvP talents are going to have very little impact on almost anything. In fact, I don't think these honor talents will even work in world PvP. So prepare to be fucking mortally wrecked by PvEers who have sick raid trinkets and just gonna one-shot your disadvantaged ass while backpedaling and breathing all heavily down their mics to their guildmates on TeamSpeak, and oh man, that's gonna be horrible. No offense to PvEers. But I really do think that PvP talents are just gonna be glyphs all over again. It'll feel cool playing BGs and arenas to unlock your talents one by one because, you know, progression and all that, but in the end, they're just kind of passively going to exist in the background. On the topic of farming for PvP talents, we have prestiging in PvP now. This gives me a glimmer of hope, because let's face it, I'm just a washed up old BG hero as it is, so actually having a real incentive to play Battlegrounds again, you know, actively, is pretty cool, and I doubt I'm alone on this one. I'm sure a lot of people prefer arenas, but there are a fair number of us who don't have the time, don't like the intensity, or like me, literally don't know a single person who plays Arena that hasn't since quit the game. So for me, bring on the prestige system and make the rewards worth my while. I want it to be time consuming, you know, a borderline painful struggle, so that when I finally do prestige, I can feel like I've actually achieved something in the game again, because that right there is a long lost feeling indeed for a BG hero like me. And to summarize that, I feel the prestige system is a brilliant move by Blizzard. A lot of people don't give a shite about it, but for those of us who do play Battlegrounds, we should now have a reason to be hitting the Q button over and over for a long time throughout Legion. A reason which quickly fell absent during the past few expansions, and this bodes well for the stamina of the upcoming expansion. Next up, the way stats work in PvP instances. You guys know how it works. Every class and spec is going to have set stats and ability tuning while in Battlegrounds or arenas. Not in World PvP, which, you know, well, can finally and sadly die almost entirely in Legion. Having player stats not adjust during World PvP seems like a stupendous step backwards on that matter. But moving on, you can now queue into BGs and arenas in full green gear and be just about as competitive as someone in full purples. This is a good change, just not for montage makers like me, because let's face it, basically every 1v3 ever recorded and put into a movie has been fought against new players in full green and grey gear. But in all seriousness, equalizing the stats like this will lead to more PvP participation. I can't even begin to count how many max level ults I've given up on in the past, because I just couldn't keep up with the gear curve. Now we can multi-class with a lot less effort, and that's likely going to keep people entertained for a lot longer, meaning Legion should have more longevity as an expansion. So thus far, meh to PvP talents, but the prestige system and the PvP stat balancing looking really good. These are the kind of things that will make Legion an engaging expansion with, you know, on the surface at least, a lot more stuff to do than in Warlords. Next up, the higher your arena rating is, the better gear you get. If you're a PvEer watching this, you might think to yourself, well, isn't that shit just common sense? Nope, for far too long there actually hasn't been a tangible character reward for playing consistently at good ratings, or pushing above 1600, you know, or 1700 arena rating for the first time. Not unless you're impressed by a title every 4 months, or, you know, you push all the way to Gladiator and get yourself the rank 1 mount. Finally, the common arena player gets a reward for improving their skills week on week. So for anyone wondering right now why PvP gear even matters, it turns out that the player stats in PvP are not completely static. Your character's item level in PvP gear very slightly impacts your preset stats, even in a PvP instance. It has been said in a Blizzard interview that the difference in stats between an average, you know, say a 1500 arena player and a 2.4k arena player should only be around 5% in favor of the 2.4k guy. Whether or not this turns out to be accurate or not, we're just gonna have to wait and see. But I love it. I'm not a big arena player myself, but just like the prestige system in Battlegrounds, I feel like this system is going to give a lot of people a reason to keep on queuing over and over. Not to hit some lame conquest cap, but because they're actually working hard to improve their character and their gameplay, this should further add to the longevity of Legion. This is all based on what I've heard of the arena gear system. If it turns out to be inaccurate, then not much I can do about that. So honestly, so far, it's looking okay, right? Or at least it beats Garrisons and incentiveless PvP, but now the time has come to address what I think is the single biggest threat to the success of Legion in the long term, and that is the mishandled beast that is ability pruning. Because at the end of the day, even if every single feature promised in Legion shows up on our doorstep as advertised, if our characters just aren't fun to play, then it's basically all for nothing. Destruction Warlocks, a spec I'm a little bit familiar with, it's fair to say, looks set to devolve into a button-mashing, brain-dead, mongoloided, imbecilic ogre of their former selves, and this is a spec I've played since the Burning Crusade. It used to be like playing a piano, now it's closer to a fucking triangle. We spam Shadowburns repeatedly, then conflagrate things, then get right back to spamming Shadowburns. For some reason, Demonic Circle is now a talent, don't know who the fuck put that there. Shadow Fury actually has a 1.5 second cast time. Backdraft is an unplayable talent because it shares a T with Shadowburn, so that's gone. Dark Soul was renamed to Soul Harvest, also becoming a talent, and our old friends Fellflame and Shadowflame are heard of only in fables and myths, like legends painted on the walls of ancient caves. My action bars, for Affliction as well as Destro, have never been this bare, and it might not be this bad for every other class, but I've heard the reports of more than a dozen pissed off people at this point, and I'm starting to worry that they've gone and done a destro on more specs than not. So this now has me thinking, even if Legion's features all work out, how long before people feel like they're just running themselves into the ground with their class? Because not everyone has the time to just level another class, you know, switch it up and learn to play it as at a basic level. I, for one, am planning ahead of time to multi-class as much as possible to try and avoid becoming straight up bored with Warlock this expansion, and that's just not a great sign. Again, maybe this doesn't apply to you and your class, but I can't help but feel like WoW's insistence on growing that little bit more simplified and melon-head friendly with every expansion, it's just going to end up making the whole thing incrementally more tedious as well. How will this impact the success of Legion in the long run? Probably badly, but it's impossible to say how badly. It really depends on, you know, what was pruned from each spec, whether people generally like it or not. Just saying, as a Warlock Blizzard, if you're watching, there are 0 Warlock players who cracked open the fucking champagne when Demonic Circle became a talent. Changes like this literally remove fun from classes. So I could go on and on forever, but I'm just going to brush over a few more points really fast so we can wrap this up. The new transmog system with the wardrobes and stuff, awesome, really cool. It's something to do while you're online by yourself and nothing else is happening, but I don't think it's really going to be a game changer. Some people did transmog runs before the wardrobe system, and mostly the same people will probably be doing them after as well. Maybe it'll entice a small percentage more players to do some transmog runs, I don't know. Still a great change though. I'll probably end up doing some fashion craft runs here and there myself. Next up, artifact weapons. These will seem really cool at first, just like getting purple items did back in vanilla WoW, but once you really look around and comprehend that every paladin now has the Ashbringer, just like you, it'll just be another arbitrary item. It'll be just like PvP talents that you must take. It'll just be like essential major glyphs back in the day. I think they will have very little actual bearing on the expansion as a whole, and are more just a hook to entice older players to return for Legion. The last point I want to mention is possibly the most important of them all, and even though I'm just going to skim over it here, it's because I could easily make a whole other video discussing it in depth. Will Legion fail to save WoW because the game has already strayed too far from what once made it so blindingly addictive? Has the game become too easy? In Blizzard's hopes to retain players, is the WoW of today giving us too much stuff for free? Gold, epic items, mounts, easy professions, and now fucking legendary weapons. When in the old world of Warcraft, you only got what you worked your ass off for. Legion isn't fixing much of these things, so maybe it's doomed to fail no matter what. Or maybe the game's just too old, I don't know. What do you guys think? For me, the early months of Legion should be great. Farming prestige levels, you know, dabbling in arena, just mucking around with world quests will, I think, keep us entertained for a good while. Of course, there will be a huge rise in subscribers at launch, followed by a huge drop because of this, you know, that's just generally what happens, alright? But will the drop have stabilized after 6 months, or will the subscriber count bleed, continue to flow? I personally think that the game will continue on a steady decline. Nothing as terrible or as drastic as we saw in Warlords, however. I expect Legion to be a lot more engaging than Warlords, which is awesome. But the age of the game and the ability pruning, I think, will be enough to exhaust some players into looking elsewhere to other games, at least for their PvP needs. Can't speak for PvEers. How do you think Legion will do? Is it a second iteration of Warlords, or will it have 11 million players actively playing the game again? Let me know, guys. Discuss below, and if you disagree with someone, don't be a knob end and start raging. I trust you guys to be cool, but for now, I'm going to leave it here. So thanks for coming by, subscribe here for more Blizzard games, and I'm going to catch all of you guys just a tad bit later. Mush thing, you idiot, man! You noob! You clown creator, man! Oh, we lost! We lost! Oh my god, you